All right. So here we go with our second installment of the joy of facilitating small groups. So I know last week we talked about just agreed together on the significance of that small group time. Just anytime you get that kind of time with people, get them talking and sharing their heart, there's just an opportunity for something really special to happen in relationship with other people. And like, there's nothing like it. And yet, it's also just really stinking hard to do. I think not always just because it's young people, but I think sometimes because it is young people, like they're already trying to figure out, do I like you or do you like me? And like, there's a lot of complicating factors in getting people to open up and things that are going on in school that maybe you don't know about between students and they end up in the same group with you. I mean, it's just fraught with potholes and all kinds of stuff. And so it's been good to have a little bit of time set aside to just talk about how can we make the most of, that stuff. And folks who are going to watch the recording later, they had a chance to see, the one we did last week, where we were talking about just the leader's heart and sometimes what they bring to those small group settings. And then this idea that Jesus is in the circle. We're really trying to steward a moment to influence students, not trying to get them to follow us, but to follow him. And it was just good. It was really good to talk about those things with each other. And we got another handful of topics we can kick around tonight. Dave, I'm trying to remember. I generally remember pretty well, but I'm trying to remember, what was your background in Chicago with youth ministry and things like that?
Yeah, so I kind of came from working at the high school ministry in my church out there. Went to Willow Creek, and so I kind of grew up in that ministry. But I was on staff of the junior high ministry, and last 4 or 5 years I was really involved in their high school ministry, and that was all small groups ran. It was. We had what we called house groups, and then within each house group, you'd have several small groups, and that's kind of the way the ministry was ran. So I was,
right on.
Very small groups. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So you're bringing into Heston some really good. You got some reps already with sitting with students and talking about stuff.
Yeah. That's what I love, small groups, and that's kind of where I'm still learning, kind of what, our ministry will look like going forward. Cause I, just started in January, but
yeah,
I think it's going to be a lot of, small groups focused and, how do we do this? And, empowering my leaders to, to give them the freedom to kind of lead their small groups however, they see fit.
Yeah.
Kind of, releasing them to lead.
Yeah, that's great. So good. Such a good way to do it. Well, so I've got, there's 4 topics we can kind of kick around, and I'll just, I was going to say, Sergio, do you have anything you're owning here coming in? Anything you're feeling?
No, no. I mean, nothing worth mentioning that hasn't already been mentioned. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, this first of the remaining topics, idea that listening is an art. And it involves pretty practical things, but honestly, they're things we've got to, you got to practice. They're not going to come really easily. So, Dave, I think you saw the email that I sent out everybody earlier. If you've got that up in front of you, if not, it's fine. But yeah, did you say hold on a sec? Cool. So there's this idea of asking open questions. We'll just come back to each of these. Asking open questions, not assuming that you know anything, even if you have a really, really strong idea that you know what's going on. Like, it's always best to have people tell you what's going on rather than sort of kind of judging a little bit. Not trying to fix problems, which is super hard to do when you love and care about people, but to just really helping people know that you love them. The idea that silence is okay, we talked about that before, and that the whole goal is we're trying to actually have them talk and not us talk, So I'm curious, Dave, just from your time with small groups before, this idea of like asking open questions, is that something that's familiar to you? Like you've heard that before?
Yeah. I think that's a great point and something that you know I think that's kind of how you create conversations. And, um, getting them talking and even asking the same question even multiple times, but just phrasing it differently.
Yeah.
Because some might hit someone differently just for how you ask it, and
Yeah.
it's not that situations like that where you just kind of keep trying and they don't realize that you're asking the same question, but you just keep phrasing it differently, and
Yeah.
finally you get a response.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember how easy it was to not ask open questions, just because I wasn't paying attention. Like a yes/no question is like a total dead end, unless they're a talker, right? You say, "Did you have a good day?" No.
Yeah.
Or yes. And then they just sit there, right? So yes/no questions are just like you're just asking for having to ask another question if you ask a yes/no deal.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Any question that gets a one-word response.
Yeah, and I think another question that really shuts down conversation is a question that starts with why, especially in our culture, because it sounds so accusatory. It sounds like you're like, well, why did you say that?
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Why do you feel that way?
You're just asking, like you're just kind of closing off people's spirits a little bit, I think, when we do that. So I think about
they get triggered a little bit too from they almost feel like you're a parent, like kind of.
Oh my gosh, what were you thinking?
Right.
Plainly, I wasn't, Mom. But
yeah, I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think there are also like statements that they're questions, but they're not phrased as questions. I find those helpful because then someone doesn't feel like they're sitting there having like 20 questions, right? Like, well, you just asked me that big question. Now you're asking me another big question. And, but saying things like, help me understand,
Yeah.
I can't think of an example right now, but help me understand
Yeah.
what you're feeling about this, or help me understand how that all happened, or
Totally.
whatever.
My favorites is just like, man, tell me more about that. Like it just says, I'm listening, I'm interested, and
yeah, I care.
Yeah.
And it gives permission.
Yeah.
Share with me what you want to share.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask something really specific because maybe you don't want to share that, but maybe you're going to feel bad shutting me down.
Yeah.
It does. It just says, I'm here, I'm listening to whatever it is you want to talk about. Yeah, tell me more is great.
So this other question about not assuming that we know anything, that's a really tough one, but it's such a relational safety question, because let's say you do know exactly what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Or told you something, or somebody told you something, and it's, you just don't want to have people feel like you're shoehorning into their hearts, right? You want them to be able to bring it up. But like, even if it's not something specific, like, somebody got, didn't get picked for a role in the school play, and they're like really embarrassed about that or something. And but it's, I mean, with an example like that, you could say, hey, I hear the tryouts didn't go so great. How you doing? But I think sometimes when it's maybe some heavier duty stuff.
Well, when it's like relationship stuff between students and you've already heard one side of it, and you care about all of them.
Yeah.
But if you go in and they feel like you've already got this whole perspective on what's going down, they're like, I'm out.
When Mary Kay and I were getting some listening training years ago, they talked about this idea of being tentative. And it's always just sort of testing everything. So I'm testing the waters to see if there's openness to even have a conversation right now with somebody. Like, hey, you seem like you're down. What's going on? Or, it's just like that kind of testing. But then when they start sharing stuff, and I'm going to try to give some kind of a summary or a reflection of what they're saying, I actually don't know if I got it right. I mean, I may have heard them well. Maybe they're not communicating well. So what I'm confident I heard is actually off. And so I would say, well, it sounds like you're saying this. Like this is pretty normal communication stuff. But it's so interesting that when it's live and you're in a small group setting, it just feels like the stakes are high. Like you don't have a lot of time to mess around here. You don't want to waste an opportunity. It's really easy to skip the tentative piece instead of just really letting them say, yeah, you understand what I said. I don't know anything until I hear it from you, that it's actually expressed from you. And I think that really does something in relationships with people. It's just respectful, right? It just says, like you're a person too. I don't look down on you. I may be a little further along in this walk with Jesus than you are, but like we're both people. We both have lives. We both have questions. We both doubt. We both have struggles, So like, I know what it's like when I doubt, but I don't know what it feels like when you doubt.
Yeah.
Some people get excited about doubts because it means they're going to be learning some stuff or figuring stuff out. Other people are terrified when they're doubting it. So it's like, I just don't want to assume that you're like me in any way at all. Like I hear that and I go, oh my gosh, I'm anxious all of a sudden. And they're not anxious at all. Like I don't want to put my shadow on them.
Sure.
Just because I'm older than you, so I've been where you are before. I remember I was taking a class one time about youth culture, and I've never forgotten this. Like I was 16 before, but I was not 16 in the culture where they're 16. So like you're experiencing stuff differently than I did, even if there's some basic identity and autonomy kind of things that are going on. Like, I don't know what it's like to be 16 in 2019. I wouldn't want to be, frankly. Like, like, I really look up to you because you're trying to, figure this out with Jesus in a time when it's really different than when I was 16. You know what I mean? So this whole tentative thing, I think it's just, I think it just makes people feel honored.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way in relationship stuff. Anyway, I don't want to beat that up too much, but it feels important. You guys got any thoughts about that being tentative?
Recently I had and I feel like a lot of youth groups, go through this, but we had two people that were dating in our youth group and then they broke up, and so there should probably be a rule that you can't date with the youth group, but when they broke up, it just gets so messy and like people want to take sides. And so I feel like, for in this area, it's like, especially like when a breakup happens, you need to just listen to both sides and not take sides, and because it just gets really messy. And
it's like you can only break up or start dating during the summer.
Right.
Do it
Right. Or when you graduate, then you can do whatever you want. But
It's funny. I know, it's so awkward. So awkward.
So let's talk a little bit about this idea of not fixing people when they're sharing problems and things like that. You ever been tempted? But so let's just own that comes from, let's just say it comes from a good place. It's a desire to help. Right? But what does it make people feel like if they feel like you're trying to fix them? What does it feel like to them?
I feel like they don't feel like they're being heard or listened to, or and you kind of especially you feel like even with younger kids, especially junior high kids, they have big problems to them, but seem like little problems to everyone else. It could be a relationship, it could be a test or something like that, but so you just come in and try and fix it, because to you it seems like a small problem. You just go and try and fix it like that, but it's not that simple to them. So.
So then if we're going to try to watch ourselves as group facilitators with fixing, what are some things that we can do instead?
When we have groups discuss something, we don't always lay out the same ground rules before each time. There are different ones we focus on. And that's part of in cultivating that group culture. This is kind of part of that. But we will say things like, this is the question. We're going to allow people to answer it. And after someone shares, let's thank each other for sharing. Maybe paraphrase back what you heard so that you really understand. But no one's giving any advice. No one's giving any advice. And that's not just for leaders, it's for students too.
Yeah.
Because we've all been in the thing where like one student starts going off giving advice and you're like trying to really gently tell them to, stop talking.
Well, you know what you need to do is.
Yeah. And yeah, that is it's dangerous territory. So we want to avoid that. Yeah. Because it assumes that following Jesus, spiritual growth has a black and white manual that you follow and it just works out.
Yeah.
Well, and that's just not it.
And I think another thing, we're going to touch on this when we get to I think we've got one called download versus discovery. I think one of the things that we inadvertently do with fixing and suggesting and advising is actually hinders people because they never learn how to work something out themselves. They're always dependent on other people to get answers and things like that. And obviously we're not saying if somebody says, what should I do? Right? They're talking and they're like, I don't know what to do. But then, okay, we can move in that direction. But like, even still, it's sort of like, well, what do you feel like doing right now? Like, start with them. Like, what are the things that you've been considering doing about this?
Right.
And maybe 3 of them are sin, right?
Yeah.
And the 4th one seems like it might be a good idea. Like, I think I need to talk to that person. And they're like, that sounds like a good idea, right? So now it's like somebody's affirming what's going on within them. And then they go, oh, like I'm actually learning how to take what I know from maybe what my parents are teaching me and what the scriptures say and even what the Spirit is saying to me right now. And I have a brother or sister in Christ who's saying, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of God's design that we speak into each other's lives, right? Like that's, I mean, we all have stories of when someone spoke into our life in a way that we really needed.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have that, we'd probably actually feel like maybe God doesn't see us, because there's something really powerful about when God puts it on someone else's heart to carry a message to you or whatever. Yeah. But I would agree with, like really good counselors, and they're trained in this, ask really good questions. And those questions are intentional. They're not just like, oh, what's a question I could ask, And it kind of makes me think of in like newspapers and media, they say they don't tell you what to think about something, but they do tell you what to think about, right? Like the newspapers are telling us what to think about, not necessarily what to think about a topic, but they're telling us the topics that we should think about.
Yeah.
And
good.
Just separate, I mean, we could get into all sorts of stuff with media and news and things, but when it comes to students, it's like, it's okay to suggest an idea of something to think about, not telling them what to think, but okay, have you thought about how these choices might affect your relationship with your best friend? And how might these choices affect how you feel about yourself? Or like, I mean, you have to be careful how we word them, or it sounds like we know the answer, but it's also to say, like, when they're making decisions and they're asking us to come alongside because they need help. I mean, like when we're young are like, I'm freaking out and I'm, things feel really big and scary. They're asking for someone like, walk with me, but they aren't asking. I mean, like Stephen's right. I would agree. Like you can't give the answers. It doesn't help them because all they become are adults who don't know how to find answers.
I remember when my daughter was in college, so it's a little different than a small group setting, but I think the principle applies. My daughter was in college and she wanted to move off campus. And I honestly didn't want her to move off campus. I thought there were a lot of good experiences that would happen on campus for her. But, she's becoming an adult and needs to be able to make some decisions for herself. So she talked about it. And I said, well, tell me what your thinking is, whatever she thought about some stuff. And I thought there were 2 or 3 things that she hadn't thought about yet. And so I just asked, like, so what are you thinking about this? And I mentioned 2 or 3 things. And it was really cool because she was like, That's really good. I should do some more, like, I need to do some more thinking around that, or I need to get answers to some more questions. And I think by the time she made the decision to move off campus, like, she had thought it through more fully. So, so I love what you said, Sarah Jo. We don't tell people what to think, but we're saying, here's some topics that you need to have picked around some more, right? Or tonight, we're going to talk about dating or family dynamics, or like, we decide what the topic is, and then there's going to be all kinds of discussion that goes on around that. That's pretty good. I like that.
That's really helpful. I think it's along the lines of, it's helping them, weigh the options they have in front of them. And it's, this is the situation you're in. If you do this, this is your option. This is what could happen, and just kind of help them think through, what those options are going to plan out. And, and it's hard to not do it unbiased. Try to do it unbiased. Helping kind of figure out what each option is looking like.
Right. Good.
With the fixing and the listening and all that, I think part of the reason, especially leaders, students just like to know it all most of the time, but I think part of the reason leaders have a hard time wanting to fix is that we aren't always willing to sit with the discomfort of a disciple being in a place that is not necessarily even a good place. Like, we want to resolve it. Everything feels better resolved. My personality is like, resolve it yesterday. So I've had to really learn and just surrender, like, okay, that's gotten easier with age because of experiences and just seeing how things work out.
Yeah.
Now I'm extremely comfortable with a kid in a situation. If a kid's in a dangerous situation, obviously I'm going to intervene like right away. But when they're like, well, I don't know if God created the earth. I'm like, okay. And all right. So, like, parents and grandparents are all nervous, like, well, they don't believe in 7-day creation and all these things. And like, they think that there might be like also parts that have evolved. And I'm like, and like, we're going to be all right. Like, this is so small scale.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to sit with that and not feel responsible for it, because our responsibility isn't actually to change their mind, and we won't. We're not going to change their mind.
You're making that's such a good point, is that how much of what goes on sometimes in small group dynamic is just the junk going on in the heart of the person who's controlling the conversation, right? So it kind of leads into our next one about silence, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I may have a hard time with silence because my brain is in overdrive right now. Do they understand the question? Do I need to state it again? Is anybody getting ready to speak? Is it clear? Am I an idiot? Should I not be here? Like, it's crazy, right? And so to stop traffic, I'll just start talking. It's just bad.
And we all know, like, students love a good shock value, right?
Like, the big joke is, okay, nobody's saying anything in small group. We're going to make him nuts.
Make him sweat, right?
We're all taking bets on how long it is before Stephen has to open his mouth and handle this.
Our students talk because they know I'll sit there the whole time. I'm like, all right.
But I think you train students if you don't sit in that silence a little bit.
It's true.
If it gets really long, I might say, I might even say with a little joke, like a little joking tone, like, should I repeat the question? Right. I've been in some ones that were quiet for a while, and somebody finally says, would you say the question again? I'm like, sure, no problem. But if you seriously get crickets and it's not moving, like, there's something going on here. Like, can you tell me what's going on? And somebody says, like, so-and-so died today. Like, some student got hit by a car and they're in the hospital, and I have no idea, right? Like, there could really be something else going on. But aside from the extreme things.
Well, what about when they just literally have nothing to offer?
Yeah.
Like, we want to assume that they're just always withholding. And I don't think they are. I think sometimes we ask questions and they're like, inside their head, they're hearing crickets. They're like, I want to come up with something to say.
Yeah.
I just don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
Like,
And I don't want to be stereotypical either, but generally that's going to be guys.
Mm.
Some of the most painful small group settings I've been in with teenage guys. And I'm telling you, man, nobody is home sometimes. Seriously. Like they don't. Give me a ball. Well, that's a really good, that's just, I'm glad that idea just popped into my head, because sometimes you need to take 2 or 3 guys and go for a walk and talk. You need to shoot some hoops and talk, because it's not happening when we're eyeballing each other. Like that's a very, like in the animal kingdom, that's how pecking orders get sorted out, is when animals look each other in the eye, right? So yeah, I'm telling you, you sit across the table from a guy and have a conversation, that can be really super intimidating. So shooting hoops, it's amazing. I mean, I can't even believe the conversations I've had when I go for a walk. So I'm shoulder to shoulder with somebody. The things they'll say when they don't have to say it to my face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it is setting with people. You know?
Well, some people just think better in motion.
Yeah, and they're like you said, that their emotion, their minds get distracted, and sometimes in the silence they almost feel the pressure of trying to come up with a good answer, or something like that.
Yep.
Doing something, they're not thinking about the pressure of that.
Right. And how often should we just, for lack of a better word, but like just reward any and all participation?
Yeah.
Like, okay, great. You said a highlight of your day, and your highlight was that it was pizza for lunch at school. Sweet. Great. I will take that. You said it out loud on your own and you meant it. So great. I mean, I don't love shallow stuff, but I think sometimes with young people, you get with junior high boys, it's sharing. Okay, great. Awesome. That sounds delicious. School pizza. But, to just positive affirmation.
Yeah. And it helps to know the people in your group too. It's
right.
Because progress looks different depending on who it is. And the kid that doesn't ever talk and says something about having pizza for lunch, and that was the most he's talked in a year, and that can be a good day.
You're like, I'm having pizza at the next small group, people.
Oh, there's somebody. That's a leader who's listening right there. I just had a great idea. We should have pizza next week. Sergio, I think this next topic, this idea of cultivating a group culture, is one that was on your heart some, developing expectations for the group.
Yeah, I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on it, but, one thing I've heard from students and leaders, especially because they've seen it the whole time. So this is like year 8 of working with this youth group, but that's 2 whole different youth groups, 4 and 4 years, right? And that makes developing culture a really revolving door. Youth, not like that. Like you can develop a culture in like an adult church body, and people are going to come and go, but like people who get it, like they're not leaving. I mean, most of the time, right? Like not all of them. But in high school youth group, they all leave. Like they're going to leave, and you're going to have new ones. And so it's like this revolving. So you have to be really intentional about passing that down. But then it's still going to shift. There's still going to be dynamics about it that shift naturally because your personalities shift and people shift, and it's just different groups. But like in all of the conversations of like as they're getting ready to search for a new youth pastor, they've been asking a lot of the youth leaders questions and stuff, and they have been referencing a lot like this culture, this group culture, this dynamic. There's these expectations, and our students, even just like in the senior interviews I did the other night, talk about things about our youth group that they really appreciate, and that is from cultivating a group culture.
Yeah, that's good.
And I've been trying to think like, how did we actually do that? Because not to like, I'm not like, oh, look, I'm just so natural at that. But when you do something naturally, like there's plenty of things I've had to learn a lot about how to do that well. Asking good questions is not something I'm good at. I'm really not. I've prayed to be to be better at asking questions. I've read stuff about asking better questions. I've been taking mental notes when people ask me good questions. I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. Like, how'd you come up with that? You know? But developing group culture came a little bit more naturally to me.
Yeah.
And as I think about like what things did we do for that to happen, I just always talked really upfront about how I envisioned an evening going and where there was freedom and where there wasn't freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, hey, this is fluid. This doesn't have to look a certain way, but this does have to look a certain way. Right. Like, and we did also a lot of like big, large group sharing. Again, this is like one of those things that like, if you're not in tune with the Holy Spirit, you're not going to figure out the thing that works for your group, because there's things that we did that I don't think would work normally with a group our size. And I'm not quite sure why or how that was the case. My children are fighting, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted here. I work great with teenagers, but 5 and 8 year olds be testing me on the limits here. Anyway, so we would talk really honestly and openly. And for a while at the beginning, even though, you want to get leaders to not talk as much, we also lived by example and saying like, I'm going to be a little vulnerable too. I'm going to share a little about why that lesson convicted me, or I'm going to be exposed, because you're asking them to be exposed. That's what you're asking. That's what it feels like to them.
Yep.
And if you're not willing, they're like, you're just a grown up who's got it all figured out, and I'm going to share this thing, and you're going to be looking at me like, So obviously there's good, healthy boundaries. You don't want to overshare. There's things they don't need to know about our lives and things. But you can share in what feels like a very vulnerable way to them without giving all the details or all that stuff. I've been surprised by students who, even though they don't relate to my struggle, like that's just it, like they don't always have to relate. It's just to be vulnerable. Like, oh, we're talking about speaking with kindness. And I say in my small group, well, you know what? You know where I've been the least kind this week is to my own children. Like, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, and I've yelled at them more than once. And I'm not feeling great about that, And then they're like, oh, well, like, actually, I yelled at my mom and dad. Like, okay, so you're not perfect. And like gentle, subtle corrections within a group when things happen shape the culture.
Yeah.
Like, I say gentle corrections because there's just not really another way to. Yeah.
I like what you're saying, Sergio. And Dave, I want to ask you, both in Chicago and here starting off fresh in Heston, some things you feel like you're doing to try to set a tone. And I think what Sergio's describing, there's kind of two ways you do that. One is you declare it. Like, you say, here's what we're doing. Like, that's leadership. Defining reality is how I've heard that described before. Leaders define reality. I'm going to tell you how it is. And this is what we're doing. And then people follow, because people like to be led, especially like to be led well. So what is it? Like, you declare, here's what we're doing. Sometimes you say, here's why. But like, here's it. This is it. People know what the expectations are, and then they shoot for it. The other thing I think we do, we develop culture by what we model, right? And so Sergio's talking about living honestly in front of people and not hiding, faults and bad days and stuff. And I think it invites people to do the same thing. Like, oh, wow, lightning didn't hit. Oh, wow. And I know she really loves Jesus, and she's saying that she had a bad day, and she can actually talk about it. Sure sounds like she has something going on that I'd like to have going on in my life, right? Like, I feel like I can't say any of that stuff. So I think we declare it and we model it. And sounds like you've done both of those things, Sergio. So Dave, so from you, like, again, back to your Chicago life in work and also at Heston, what kind of things do you feel like you've done either on purpose or just by who you are?
Yeah. Those can be two different things often. So.
Right?
Right on.
I think there's ways I could be more intentional about doing that, but it's something I've tried, even since I've started on, kind of, setting expectations, and we've done. I've been here since January, and we've met almost every week, since then. So it's been a lot of Wednesday nights where we've done stuff, and in a lot of ways I've talked about certain things, but almost try to just say the same things just in different ways. And so I always kind of came back to, like, we did a series on stories, and just like a couple of students shared their story, a couple of leaders share a story, and just like about their lives, and and I talked about how your stories are important to us, and we want this to be a place where you feel like you can open up about whatever you're going through, and it doesn't always have to be pretty, and and it's cool because we've actually seen, I feel like we've seen a little fruit to it, and just because and even being in the Bible Belt, a lot of things that people kind of told me was, people feel like they should be a Christian even if they're not, or they feel like they should have a faith even if they don't. And so, kind of giving them an excuse and freedom to kind of have doubts about stuff and just figure out what their stuff means to them. And then, their parents' faith or anything else. Or
I think that's
go through that stuff. But yeah, go ahead.
That's safety, and that is a huge part of developing that culture. I think one of the biggest things that students would say about the culture of our group, number one, that it's safe. It's safe. It's safe, and everybody's in. Like everybody's in. You're in, and if you're in, you're expected to some degree to participate, and it's somehow not threatening. It's like you're in this, you're a part of this, and so you're going to get ample opportunities to participate in what we're doing. No one's ever going to force you, right? Like, but we're going to keep inviting you in. We're going to share, and we're going to invite you in. Like in a group dynamic of talking and things. But I think one thing that we did really well from the beginning is, so like I believe that when students come to us with some radical thought or some terrible thing they've done or some huge doubt that they're having, or even some accusatory question at us about our dumb beliefs or whatever, right? What they're really doing is, and I see this in small groups a lot, they're coming to us and they're throwing this at us, and they are going to interpret our response as how Jesus would respond to them.
Yeah.
And when we respond with grace and kindness to whatever it is they said, right? Like, I mean, I've had students walk in and just say, well, I'm actually bisexual. Okay, great. It's really good to have you here. Or I read this very intelligent blog online about how Jesus didn't actually raise your head, whatever. Like, okay, let's look at that. I mean, the last thing I want to do is look at crap resources, but whatever.
Right.
But when you're not shocked and you literally maintain the same, not a like, I don't care what you think, but like, okay, all right, I'm willing to hear you out. It takes so much patience because you're like, but most of the time when I don't respond shocked, they don't actually want to dissect it and talk about it.
Yep.
They want to see if I'll get riled up.
That's so interesting that you're saying that. Dave, have you ever had a similar experience with that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the safety thing is so big, and it's, it's like you said, it's not easy. So it's great that you've been able to do that. But we, I think students will come in, especially ones that kind of feel like they're a little different, or feel like they're kind of out there a little bit, and they want to test you and see how, like you said, how they respond, and even like someone might say something, and inside you're like, what just happened? Like, what is he saying? Like, in your face, like you can't respond. You have to kind of hold it in and
so true.
Pull a poker face a little bit, and
it's like the spiritual gift of faking it. Like,
right.
Okay.
So this kind of leads to this second to last topic, and I got to watch the time here a little bit, but about download versus discovery. So the idea with download is somebody asks a question or looks like they're asking a question, or you think you need to answer a question they haven't asked yet. You give them the download, right? It's like, well, the scripture said this, and in Romans 12, it says this, and like they ask a question and you give an answer, and it's just information moving around, right? And of course, knowledge is really important, right? But how we acquire it is maybe even more important.
Yeah.
Right? If I know something because someone told me, that's different than me knowing something because I discovered it. Maybe when you were in college science class and you had a lab where you studied what happens when this and this mix together. Then you went to the lab and you mixed the two things together and it blew up in your face. You know something about what happens when you mix those two things because it blew up in your face. Or you saw the color change, or you whatever. Like, wow, when I add more, it's more of a catalyst, and I can add too much of a catalyst and it actually shuts down the reaction. Wow. I just had a bunch of babies around, like what that means, right? So discovery is just way better for transformation than just information. Even if you look at the adult Christian population, we can all pass the Bible quiz, right? If you've been in church for a while, you know stuff. You can find stuff in your Bible. Like you can list all 66 books of the Bible and do it faster than anybody else. Like you can do all this stuff around the knowledge, but it doesn't mean that you're being faithful to Jesus. It doesn't mean that you're living it out when you speak and act. And this is, in my mind, this is where we're in the most trouble with how we understand what discipleship is in the West.
Yeah.
It's knowledge-based, not obedience-based, right? So where's my obedience come from? When I discover something that I cannot deny. I can struggle with it, but I'm not going to go, well, that's just because Sarah said that. That's just because Dave said that. It's like, no, I am having trouble sleeping tonight because I know something from the scriptures that I discovered and nobody told me, and I'm trapped. And so I get to face a surrender moment with Jesus because I'm in the process of discovering something about myself or who God is or what's, what I mean? It's just like so valuable, this discovery thing. So,
well, I think we get in youth ministry, right? And this is put on us a lot. You got to really make sure you've covered all those basics and all those Bible stories. And I think people would be really interested in knowing that if you went and quizzed my youth group right now on like Bible stories, they'd probably fail. I mean, except for the ones that like really grew up in the church. And it's not that we're not looking at those Bible stories. We are. It's just that we're not approaching it the way I often experienced it growing up. Like I grew up Nazarene, so we had quizzing. You actually went to tournaments, did quizzes, like buzzer. When you knew the answer to the question, you had teams, okay? So, and I loved my Nazarene.
Bible forensic.
But right? And so, like, that's a big shift there from the knowledge piece. What they need to know, like they need to know some basic things about the gospel, right? They need to have a mental understanding about that. But we need to teach them that we serve a God who reveals things to us. And then unleash them, right? Like teach them how we receive the Holy Spirit. I'm not saying we teach all sorts of things, but like we teach them these things and then we unleash them to say, okay, go and do that, live that, and ask God to reveal to you. And we sort of give them permission to experiment, for lack of a better word, because that's a really terrible word to use with teenagers. But I mean, their parents hate that word. But go experiment with your faith. Go do your thing with the Lord and ask all sorts of questions. And but the biggest way that we practice discovery versus download is when someone asks a question. Most of the time, I can't say every time, because sometimes questions are more like they're just really straightforward, or, like, so wait, hold on. Sarah is also Abraham's sister, questions like that. We're going to look, yes, actually, this verse shows us that she's also his half sister. So weird, I know, whatever. And things like that. But most questions we respond with things like, have you looked here? Have you, I read a really great article that got me thinking something about that. Would you like to read it? That's still someone else's information, but it's still them going to looking for it. And it's that exercise of the muscle of searching that, and students respond pretty well to that in my experience.
Yeah. I think it's one of the sweetest settings when someone asks anyone else a sincere question, like hey, what does the Bible say about this? And I go, man, that's such a good question. What have you discovered so far? And they're like, nothing. I don't even know. And I'm like, well, how would you find out what the Bible says about that? And I'm like, I don't know. Does it have a glossary? I'm like, well, it doesn't maybe have a glossary, but it has this thing, right? And so you can turn and I can look up and I go, oh my word, there's 60 verses about this. Right. And I'm like, isn't that great? Like, go read them and see what it's, right? So I think when people are asking a question, you're just like, oh my word, we just found the lead end of a gold vein, right? Because it can turn into the most unbelievable thing if we'll steward the moment and because we know how to answer that question. I'll tell you the 3 top scriptures to read to find out about that thing. But that's at the tail end of my discovery. I don't want to cheat you out of your own discovery.
That's like that.
It makes me feel good to say what I know. Get a hold of yourself, Stephen. It's not about you, right?
Yeah. And you don't actually learn it or discover it the way when you just jump to the end. Yeah. Right? We've all heard someone say something and we're like, well, that's bogus. I don't think like that. I don't feel like that. And then 7-8 years later, you're like, oh, I see how they got there. I totally got there. Yeah, for sure.
So Dave, we've been back and forth in a little bit here. What kind of thoughts do you have on this discovery versus download idea?
Yeah, I think it's great. I feel like it could help too with, students that, I feel like a lot of times students will ask questions and not really even care about the answer and just throw it out there or whatever. And so when you kind of, make them go look for the answer, it's either one, they won't do it because they don't actually care about it. So then, you don't have to worry about wasting your time trying to answer their question. They're not even going to listen to anyways. And then other than that, if it is something they really do care about, you'll see how much it matters to them and by how much work they actually put into trying to figure it out themselves. Yep. And then you can have a conversation after that on, what they found or, and you can still kind of give your 2 cents even after that. And you can have a better conversation of back and forth,
We have to shift how we look at questions. We look at questions as a pursuit of knowledge, and occasionally they are. With young people, I find they are rarely about acquiring knowledge. It is rare, in the heart motivation. They're not I just need more knowledge, Right. They want understanding, but what understanding is really about is about intimacy. So the questions are not about knowledge, they're about intimacy. And if we approach their questions like they're about knowledge, that's all they're going to get. Yeah. But if we approach their questions like it's about intimacy with us, an appropriate intimacy, I want to they're inviting us into a journey that they're on sometimes, right? But more importantly, intimacy of wanting to know God, right? To have understanding, have relationship with him and with the Trinity. And I that I've never really wanted to give students answers. And at the beginning, it was because I was terrified to give them answers. I didn't have the answers. I had things I thought, but there's no way I could be actually right. And, right. And then it was hey, this is a really good way to disciple people. So thanks God for that. But at the beginning, I think I was just terrified to give answers. I didn't want to give an absolute answer because I was genuinely very humble in the belief that like I could tell them the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this,
Yeah.
the reality is that's still true. I mean, right? Like, like, who am I? I mean, it's possible I could have the wrong understanding of a thing or a way to apply that or whatever. But if we approach it about intimacy, knowledge just loses its power. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm thinking too. I'm gonna look it up here really quick. Um, knowledge isn't just to know stuff. Like the goal
Right.
is never just to know stuff. So this is really interesting. From 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of man or of angels but don't have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. So like the whole thing is about love, like about being the kind of person that Jesus was in the way he laid down his life, the way he lived life for other people so that people would be able to have a renewed, rekindled, revitalized relationship with God. Like that's it's never just to know stuff. So like what you say, knowledge puffs up.
Yeah, but love builds up. I was just about to say that.
Yeah. So we know all kinds of people who are all about their knowledge and they're not.
We love them.
You know, it's like adventures in missing the point. I mean,
Pharisees. It's the Pharisees.
Oh my gosh. So we just don't want to be that. Like we don't want to lead anyone down that road. Like that is not what we're going for here. So I love discovery versus download in that it creates natural opportunities for application. Like if what you're learning tonight is true, what's something that could look different this week in your life? Like get really specific. Like, wow, honesty is really important to God. I should stop cheating on tests. I have a science test on Thursday, and I don't think I'm going to cheat this time. Wow, I'm going to need to study differently, right? Like that is awesome, right?
Yeah.
But I think as leaders, we actually have to lead people into that kind of thing where we say, if what you learned tonight was true, then what difference would it make this week in something that's going on? I'm actually going to give you some time to think about it because I want everyone to come up with something specific. And it's going to be great. Like this is what it's all about right here is that our lives actually start being conformed to something else because of what we know, because of what we learn, you know? And then that becomes a really easy thing to just revisit next week. Hey, last week we each said one thing that let's just hit it. Let's go around. And some people are going to crush it and other people forgot. And that's all part of the messy journey, right? I interrupted Sarah Jo at one point. I threw up a couple of quotes about this before she was done talking about the other thing. But I want to just point them out really quick. There's two here. Answering questions doesn't transform. It might transfer information, but it doesn't make fundamental shifts inside of a person. It can be really enlightening information, you know, but if we're going for transformation, we need to be thinking a different way about information and knowledge and discovery. The second quote is, what does it mean to move from an information transfer to a learning design model or discovery? There are several initial presumptions. First, start where the learner is, not where you are. I love that. Second, let them drive the agenda. And third, allow them to be the author, not you. So you're just walking with them. So I ask a question and say, man, that's a great question. Tell me where that's coming from. Like, where does that get generated? And they'll say, well, you know, maybe it has something to do with marriage and divorce. Like I saw my parents fight for the first time and I'm scared. So what does the Bible say about divorce? And they're like, well, it's good to know it's coming from a place of fear, right? Like that's relationship. And then they drive the agenda. And it's like, well, no, like let it come from them rather than from you. And then in the end, they walk away maybe with another question or something. but it's, it's theirs. Anyway, Dave, you got any thoughts about that before we move on to this last thing?
I think that's great. I mean, this whole time I'm trying to think, how do I communicate this to my leaders and who lead our small groups every week, and so I think sharing a quote like that is huge, and getting them to understand that this whole thing and about I think is just really good. So
Yeah.
are there any like books or anything that you Sarah was asking the question.
Yeah. Well, there's something it's called Discovery Bible Study. It's like a method that is about this whole thing. And I see you taking notes there, Dave. I can probably come up with some really simple things that you could look at, not whole books, but there was a recent kind of online training that an organization called Beyond did around discovering Bible study. It's probably archived, and I could provide it to you. But I'm telling you, Discovery Bible Study, like that method of reading the scripture and asking questions and letting people answer the questions for themselves, is like a revolutionary thing when it comes to transformation. Because when people discover something, they own it in a way that is utterly different than just knowing information. It just moves people to, wow, like I am compelled here because I can't unknow what I just discovered, right? But if I can go, oh, well, that's just what so-and-so thinks, I can discard that really easily,
Yeah, transferring this to your leader. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like, especially like this, this in this age where like just information's everywhere, and kids are being pumped with information like crazy, and it's like when you can find something that actually connects with them, and where they actually want to learn more and want to actually find out more about, and it really connects with the things they're struggling with, and their homes or whatever it is, like that's the key. So that's
and Discovery Bible Study is actually very simple, like on purpose. It's very simple because it's meant to be repeatable. If we're supposed to make disciples, then I need to be able to become a disciple in the same way that I would make disciples. And so if I know Discovery Bible Study method because that's what I use, then I automatically apply that with other people that I'm walking with, Yeah. Well, this last section is just about dynamics. It's really basic stuff, but sometimes we gloss over it really easily. And so we're talking about things like just preparation for small groups. If small groups typically meet after like a teaching time, it would be really good if the leader would provide a couple of starting questions, even just one really good open-ended question to get the conversation rolling. And sometimes I think when we get done with a teaching time and we go to small groups, leaders are like deer in the headlights a little bit, because all of a sudden they're responsible, but they don't know what to do. And so a really simple thing is, serve your leaders by actually giving them guidance about how to move through that. Another thing that's really basic is just small group size. Sarah Jo shared a pretty special dynamic with her group that they were actually able to do large group interaction, which is really special when you're able to create that. Before you have it, or sometimes on the way to building it, you need to create smaller groups of that happening. And
I think like that, just like a little thing in this prep, we can do all these things in the dynamics. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but on the, one of the greatest detriments in youth ministry is how short the lifespan is of most youth pastors and youth leaders. And for our group, myself and some of the leaders have done all 8 years together, or 7 years. I guess a good chunk of them were after that first year. So that's not to like guilt youth pastors who don't stay for a long time. And I'm leaving them, right? Like I'm leaving them, except for that I believe wholeheartedly that God wants to do a new thing and I'm not a part of it. And okay. So I would, when you're transferring this to leaders, these ideas, you need to, we all need to be thinking about how do we help leaders understand the importance of consistency and being there and the longevity of that. Like God may call some people in for a short season, but these things work so much better over time. And because you can do all, like just the time that's invested.
Right.
And so, but some of these little things like having a smaller group and stuff, right, that allows for those relationships to grow faster. It's also like if you want small groups to really take off, get your sponsors to camps and conferences.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my sponsors that don't come to camps and conferences, and they don't for really good reasons, right? Like a lot of farmers can't.
Yeah.
They have to go the extra mile here to get connected.
Yeah.
They have to go the real extra mile. When you go to camps and conferences and you spend just a few days together, those small groups really grow a lot faster. Those relationships develop. It's like steroids for that.
Yeah. Good.
Then these other things can happen a little better. I wish that we could get more people to understand. I mean, I think a lot of people do, but I wish I could get more people to see and understand how big a deal it is to get your sponsors at these things. Yeah, for that. But that was just a note on yes, we've been able to do that in a big group, but it has taken a lot of years and a lot of consistency with sponsors to be a safe place.
I was just going to say that there's so many big moments that happen at camps, and at camps I was a part of in Chicago, you just a lot of life transformation, and students open up about things where they feel comfortable with the person that they're there with.
Right.
And if leader's not there, they miss out on that stuff, and so it's like when you get back, you almost have to catch them up on what happened, and it's just
not the same.
Right. It just feels like that's I'm having a hard enough time getting students there right now, so that'll be my next goal is.
Yeah. So obviously what Sarah Jo and you are talking about, super important. So, but group size, I think size matters. Too big of a group, it's hard for students to share who haven't learned how to do that yet. I think sometimes if a group is mixed, male and female, that can also complicate things a little bit. People sometimes have a hard time coming out, to the opposite sex about something. That can be an important thing to think about. Pretty basic, but also easy to overlook. Like if you don't have enough sponsors, you're like, well, this is what we have to do. It's me and that other person, so we have to do it this way. It's like, well, maybe if I was able to recruit, just pray, God, I need some more people, then we can get to a point where that aspect of the youth group can move ahead. Right. And I'm sure you both had young people in a youth group who maybe week after week after week are just to dominate a small group time with a problem. There's something going on that's just a brokenness in their life. And we don't want to shut them down, but we want to help them understand that there's other people, that need to share. And so sometimes we just need to actually have that conversation with people and say, I'll spend extra time with you this week talking about that, but let's make sure we give other people an opportunity, to share as well. Because I think those people become kind of a crutch sometimes for people, and they just say, oh, great, he's going to share about that thing again, and I'm not going to have to say anything, right?
It annoys everybody.
Yeah, we just have to pay attention to that stuff. So anyway, just a couple practical things there. And we talked a little bit about this before, it's just the application piece. I think if it's not about, so in Great Commission, Jesus says, there's this phrase, teaching them to obey everything I commanded you. And back to the whole download discovery, if we do teaching them to know everything I commanded you, if we stay in knowledge, we're not making disciples. So it's always got to be about the obedience piece. Like, what would it look like if this is true? How might your life look different this week in something that's going on? Like helping people get to that and then letting them have time to say, yeah, I am really in a bad spot with my, with my mom or my dad or my brother or my coworker or my boss, and so if we're not helping people get in touch with what obedience is, we're not making disciples.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you asked a question about what book that was, where those couple of quotes come from. It is a very dangerous book called Spent Matches. I would highly recommend it to anyone. Spent Matches by a guy named, I think it's Roy Moran.
You're saying spent, like I spent my money?
Yeah.
Okay.
Spent Matches, Roy, Moran, and he pastors a church called Shoal Creek in Kansas City, and they're all about discovery there. It's just unbelievable what they are doing.
Can you say it again real quick?
Yeah, Spent Matches, and it's written by a guy named Roy Moran, Moran. It's probably one of the half a dozen most dangerous books I've ever read in my life. It's just, wow. Really, really good.
I'm so sorry. I got to jump off. Lee's going to head to intramurals, and I've got to.
Yeah. Yep. I was just going to say, we went over time, and I was going to say thank you. So Sarah Joe's going to take off, and I'm going to pray. And we love you, Sarah Joe.
Love you guys too. Blessings. See you soon.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah. Dave, you got anything else just before, I pray?
I think I'm going to look at that book, and I'd love to, give my leaders some kind of resources, or not that, I don't know if they would read a book, but maybe at least give them the option of something to,
Well, if you
they can learn some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If you get that book, there's a chapter on discovery. There's one chapter on the idea that could be really rich.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, totally. In fact, maybe what I could do is cut and paste that chapter into an email, and you can just decide if it's worth buying the book for. Yeah. Well, let me pray for you and just anybody else who may be watching this someday. Yeah, let's do that. You want to pray some too?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dear Lord, I just thank you for this time to be able to talk with others about, what we're trying to do is, help students know you more and help them be more involved in community and help them find people that they can talk about, their secrets and their struggles, and, there's many other places where, they just don't have an outlet to do that stuff. And so I just, I thank you that we have a space where we can learn how to do this better, and just create space for students that have no other option and just need something like this desperately. So thank you for that. I pray that whoever watches this in the future, or whoever is involved in this, just can learn and can grow and teach this to other people and teach this to their students, and it would just help them. So I praise your name.
Amen. Yeah, Father, thanks for Dave. He represents a whole bunch of people who really have a heart for young people and helping them come to know you and grow, and what it means to have life with you, what it means to discover who they are in Christ and live for you, and just to multiply disciples over and over and over again. I'm grateful for him and just the extra time he gave this evening to just have a conversation with Sarah Joe and I around these things. And we do pray, Father, that you would multiply it just over and over again. Help us to be disciples who make disciples. Help us to grow your church. Father, we know that Jesus really is the only way that people can be reconciled to you. Jesus is the only way that we can discover who we are made to be, that our purpose can only be found in you. And Father, we know all our hope is in you, not just for this life, for the life to come. So we do praise your name. Everything we do, we want to be just in line with what you're doing in the world, in us and around us. And we're grateful, people, for the ways in which we've seen growth happen already in our own hearts and lives, but also through us when you allow us to be a part of another person coming to know you or growing in you. We're just all of that just absolutely thrills us completely. We know that we're on just the richest of things when our lives are about those things. And we're just super grateful to you. Amen. Amen. Man, it got dark. It's been good getting to know you, Dave. I look forward to seeing you at high school camp here coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah. I'll see you there.
Right on. Peace.
All right. See you, man.
You bet. Bye-bye.